In Hanoi, under French colonial rule, the government had a rat problem. Thousands of them flooding the sewer system, carrying disease, embarrassing the administration. So they did what reasonable people do. They offered a bounty, 1 payment per rat tail. Tail only, because nobody wanted full carcasses hauled into government offices. Clean, efficient, logical. Within weeks, officials started noticing something they hadn't planned for. Rats running through the sewers with no tails. Alive, healthy, breeding. People had figured out that a living rat with no tail was more valuable than a dead one, because it could produce more rats, which meant more tails, which meant more money. The French had built a system so perfectly rational that the only way to profit from it was to keep the problem alive. The rat population exploded, the bounty payments skyrocketed, and the people collecting the money had exactly zero incentive to ever solve the problem the money was designed to fix. The government fought rats and funded a rat farm. And the beautiful part, the part that should keep you up at night, is that nobody in the system was being irrational. Everyone was responding to the incentives exactly as designed. The design was the catastrophe. This is called the Cobra Effect, and most people hear it as a quirky lesson about policy design. Be careful what you incentivize, which is a fine takeaway if you never want to think about it again. But the real lesson is deeper and less comfortable. The real lesson is that every solution you create for a complex problem is also an instruction manual delivered directly to the problem on how to survive your solution. You don't just fail to fix things, you educate them. And the educated version is always worse than the original, because now it has your blueprint and your blind spots in the same file. This operates at every scale. Governments do it with policy, companies do it with incentive structures, and you do it with your own life, constantly, invisibly, and with the same confident certainty that the French brought to their rat bounty. Every boundary you've set has taught someone exactly where the line is and how far they can go without crossing it. Every standard you've raised has filtered out the honest people who couldn't perform to it and let through the ones who knew how to fake it. Every system you've built to protect yourself has been running a parallel education program for the exact thing you were protecting yourself from. You're not solving problems, you're training them. Nietzsche saw this pattern running through something larger than policy. He saw it running through morality itself. He argued that every moral system designed to make people good produces a shadow version of the behavior it's trying to eliminate. Christianity's emphasis on humility didn't eradicate pride. It drove pride underground, where it resurfaced as self-righteousness. The demand for chastity didn't remove desire. It transformed desire into obsession and shame, which produced more psychological damage than the desire ever would have on its own. Every moral solution generated a moral cobra, a new version of the problem that was specifically adapted to survive inside the system designed to kill it. Nietzsche found this almost funny, not because the suffering wasn't real, but because the mechanism was so perfectly predictable, and yet nobody seemed to notice it repeating across every century and every institution. Here's why the Cobra Effect is the default and not the exception. Complex systems are adaptive. They respond to pressure by reorganizing around it. Punish a behavior and it develops camouflage. Reward a metric and the metric gets gamed, while the thing it was supposed to measure quietly degrades behind it. This isn't a flaw that can be engineered out. It's a property of any system that contains agents with their own incentives. Every system you interact with, your workplace, your relationships, your own psychology, contains those agents, including you. And the Cobra Effect doesn't require bad actors. The French bounty wasn't exploited by criminals. It was exploited by ordinary people responding rationally to the structure in front of them. The schools that gamed test scores under No Child Left Behind weren't staffed by frauds. They were staffed by teachers trying to keep their jobs inside a system that made genuine education a liability. The Cobra Effect just needs a gap between what a system measures and what it's actually trying to produce. That gap is always there. The wider it is, the more creative the exploitation becomes. Nietzsche described the person most susceptible to this as the one who is most certain of their own goodness, because moral certainty is the exact condition under which consequences stop being tracked. When you're confident you're doing the right thing, you measure your intentions. When you measure your intentions, you stop measuring your outcomes. And when you stop measuring your outcomes, the cobra breeds freely under the floor of your self-congratulation. He wrote that the most harmful person in the world is not the one who acts from selfishness, but the one who acts from conviction, because the selfish person can be reasoned with, negotiated with, predicted. The convinced person can't. They have moral immunity from their own results. This applies to your life in ways you've probably never audited. Think about the solution you've been most committed to, the strategy, the rule, the system you built to fix a recurring problem. Now measure the problem. Not when the solution was new. Now. If the problem has changed shape, grown more subtle, or started showing up in a different domain, congratulations. Your solution has been educating it. The boundary that was supposed to stop people from taking advantage of you taught the smarter ones exactly how to take advantage of you in ways the boundary can't detect. The productivity system that was supposed to give you control over your time turned you into someone who measures every hour and can't sit still without guilt. The standard you set for relationships didn't attract better people. It attracted better performers. The Cobra Effect's most elegant trick is that it makes you blame the problem for evolving instead of examining the solution for feeding it. The French didn't audit their bounty when the rat population grew. They blamed the rats. You don't examine your strategies when the same pattern keeps returning in a new outfit. You blame the pattern. But the pattern isn't repeating because it's stubborn. It's repeating because your fix taught it exactly what it needed to know to survive you. And every time you respond with the same category of solution, more rules, more systems, more control, you're running the same tutorial with a smarter student. Nietzsche proposed something radical as the alternative. Not better solutions, but a different relationship with the impulse to solve. He called it the willingness to let things be what they are, long enough to understand them before reaching for intervention. He distrusted reformers, not because reform is bad, but because the urgency to fix something almost always outruns the patience to understand what you're actually looking at. And in that gap between the urgency and the understanding, the cobra is born, every time. The French could have studied why the rats were in the sewers. They built a bounty instead. The distinction isn't between action and inaction. It's between action that understands the system it's entering and action that just wants the problem to stop. The first kind is rare, slow, and unglamorous. The second kind is confident, fast, and produces excellent short-term metrics right up until the moment the tailless rats start breeding. Every solution you build is a lesson delivered to the problem you're solving. The question isn't whether the problem will learn. It will. The question is whether you're teaching it something that makes it weaker, or something that makes it specifically, precisely, almost admirably adapted to survive everything you throw at it next.